Once upon a time, there was a dream. To this man, it was a fairy tale, filled with the glowing vision of a perfect future. To this man, it was a nightmare, a brooding time of darkness and despair. It was called apartheid, and it was dreamt in a place called South Africa. Eventually, the dream, or if you like, the nightmare, ended, and a new dream began.
I believe that we are today crossing the Rubicon in South Africa. There can be no turning back. We now have a manifesto for the future of our country, and we must embark on a program of positive action in the months and years that lie ahead.
Blacks, whites, coloreds, Indians, English, Afrikaans, Jews, Catholics, Chinese, ex-Rhodesians, Xhosa, Zulu, Tswana, Sotho. 27 million of us live in our South Africa, of which about 4 million are white, of which about 3 million have the vote, of which about 1.5 million use the vote, of which about 700,000 vote for P.W. Botha's government. That's 700,000 out of 27 million. Now, that is not a democratic government. That's a small town council. Sometimes I wonder, how do you get away with 8% of the mandate? But I suppose what you really need is full control of a broadcasting corporation. You also need a carnation and a rosette. Of course, if you have a wife with a large front, she can wear 3 of each on each side. And they don't clash with shocking pink. Rose-colored spectacles, what we also affectionately still call the Boer crown. Oh, yes. And before you cross your Rubicon, just remember that audience of 1 billion people.
Among the many people who figure prominently in contemporary South African society, one man, more than any other, has consistently held up a mirror to reflect the absurdities of the apartheid system.
Revolutionaries may stamp their feet. The communists may scream their lies. Our enemies may try to undermine us, but South Africa, here is the reality.
My name is Pieter-Dirk Uys. I'm a white South African. I'm an Afrikaner. I'm Jewish. I'm called a satirist. I've also been called a fool, a female impersonator, a liberal, an entertainer, a comedian. I just hold up a theatrical mirror and reflect the realities of South Africa around me. South Africa. You can love it, you can hate it, you can pity it, you can accuse it, you can curse it, you can envy it, you can worry about it, you can pray for it, you can try and understand it, you can disinvest from it, but you cannot ignore it.
Good evening. A high-profile speech made by the State President on Thursday at the opening session of the National Party Congress in Durban was publicized extensively in the world media. International and local reaction has been mixed, but the announced reforms are seen in some quarters to have fallen far short of expectations. This was evident in the dramatic drop of the rand in the foreign exchange markets on Friday. In what he termed his manifesto, President Botha stated that South Africa was crossing the Rubicon. Just how far-reaching are the implications of this statement, and what are the specifics relating to the reform process?
I am very desperately concerned about where we are. The situation in our country is of a deepening crisis. We are, without exaggeration, on the verge of a catastrophe.
I'm very perturbed at the moment about South Africa, but simply because I don't see the government moving with all deliberate speed to redress the really genuine grievances that the black population in South Africa has.
And I think that this country must not really fritter away the goodwill that still exists overseas, especially among decision makers. I think here of people like who are running states, heads of states that I speak to, and ministers and bankers and businessmen who really have the interests of this country at heart, but who can't indefinitely support this country, you know, if there is no fundamental change.
And I don't believe in sharing power. I don't think people can share power, especially when they are so different from each other. I believe in the dividing of land as the only possible solution for the problems we are in right now. I think we are in the beginning of the bloodiest revolution ever known in Africa.
I don't think we can really stop or can be stopped from achieving complete non-racial equality in South Africa. The question is, how will we get there?
Confusion, frustration, optimism, anger, acceptance of the inevitable. For each South African, there is a different vision and concept of the country's future. Reform in a country bedeviled by an officially entrenched system of strict racial separation that has literally built unscalable walls between all sectors of its multiracial society is seen by some as liberation and by others as a threat. The one single emotion that unites everybody at the moment in this troubled and unhappy land, no matter what the color of their skin or their political and ideological beliefs may be, is fear. The overriding question of the day is how the country will once and for all resolve its differences and cross its turbulent Rubicon without drowning. There are still many ugly blemishes on the fair face of this vast and beautiful land, a face deeply scarred by the wounds of apartheid. But fortunately, despite the agony and the ecstasy of expectation, there is still a sense of humor.
Ladies and gentlemen, we no longer practice apartheid in South Africa. We don't need to. We have it down to a fine art.
South Africans are nice people. That's a fact you should know. We love our culture. Ooh, culture, 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 culture. Ah. And we do it like so. See how things have changed. The white is black, the lies come true. Goodbye to orange, white and blue. But when you change and look away from me, I say, okay, RSA, tomorrow is another day. I say, no way, no way, no way, hey. I say, no way, no way, no way, hey. All the tears I shed for you, country of my birth. You gave me life, you gave me hope, but never taught me how to cope. But now the things that always was just isn't the same no more. What happened, hey? RSA. Is this how we whites have to pay? I say no way, no way, no way, hey. I say no way, no way, no way, hey. But the pain deep in my heart just throbs and throbs and throbs. I long for the day that we just can say, hey, RSA, are you okay? No way, no way, no way, hey. No way, no way, no way, hey. Is it goodbye to boerewors and gruwewors and the Krugerrand? Goodbye to our beautiful Table Mountain and white supremacy and P.W. Botha. No way, no way, no way, hey. Hey, RSA, are you okay? No way.
But what actually is South Africa? It's a republic occupying 438,000 square miles of area with a population of about 27 million people. A dozen different dialects are spoken, mainly by the numerous black tribal groups, but the official languages are English and Afrikaans. It is, apart from Nazi-dominated Europe during the 30s and 40s, the only country in the world this century to practice an officially endorsed system of racial segregation. As part of the grand plan of apartheid, all tribal groups have been allocated their own separate areas. These homelands, or Bantustans, were all to have been given their independence, thereby excising them from the Republic itself, and according to the great dream of the late Dr. Hendrik Verwoerd, the architect of the system, blacks would therefore never be able to become a threat to whites, as there would be no blacks in South Africa. Some of these homelands have already accepted their internationally unrecognized independence, but each one is and will continue to be heavily dependent on South Africa itself for survival. But be that as it may, this is the central core of the apartheid philosophy. Apartheid is an Afrikaans word meaning apartness or separation. The international meaning is apart-hate. Black and white must not meet. Believe it or not, this absurd theory has become practice. On the other side of one of the many Rubicon tributaries that divide this unhappy land lies paradise. Paradise in the form of a newly established independent homeland. Here you can do and see and enjoy and indulge in all the things you cannot get in Calvinist South Africa. All the banned books and movies and sexy shows and pop music and forbidden fruits are here for the picking. For white South Africans, the black homelands have therefore turned out to be a blessing. Well, to reflect the absurdities of it all, I take advantage of our madness. Mrs. Evita Bezuidenhout is her name, and she is the officially appointed South African ambassador to the independent Republic of Babeti-Kosweti, a fictitious homeland that I invented a few years ago. I invented Evita too, but this lady is more popular than me, and so real that she now gets the fan mail. Maybe Evita invented me?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. I am, of course, here this evening to give you a lecture on survival.
Evita is the star of my political chorus line, and the public love her. They believe her.
Evita Bezuidenhout was inspired by Eva Peron to a great extent, the same sort of structure of a life with started as a sort of a small-time actress, married a man of power, took over, became a legend in her own lunchtime. But also she became a clown figure, a spokeswoman in my chorus line of characters. She could say things, or she can say things that I don't particularly say as myself, or that people aren't interested in hearing from me. So she has become, in the last 5 years, a sort of a legend in South Africa. There are some people who think she exists.
Here, Mrs. Bezuidenhout is presenting the freedom of her homeland to the mayoress of Cape Town at a garden party in the presence of politicians, all quite prepared to take part in this Alice in Wonderland nonsense.
Of course, she also has her family. She has a husband, Umhasi, and then the 3 children, the daughter and the 2 sons. But I have now at my disposal 5 characters. The husband is very right-wing.
You black Kafirs had your own church!
The one son is very sensitive. The other son is very, sort of Ku Klux Klan type killer. The daughter is blonde, virginal, and fluffy.
South Africans are nice people. That's a fact you should know.
And of course, once a year, the whole family gets together to pose for their annual festive photograph. A nice white Christmas.
And she is very much a sort of a spokeswoman for the government, and she says the things that the government try to hide.
As you know, I'm a very busy person. I have just given you these few minutes of my valuable time. If I'd known that you were going to come with these silly questions, I would not have bothered, because I've got a whole waiting room full of people. Chester Crocker, I think Henry Kissinger is dropping by, well, frankly, that's all I have to say. I think you can be very lucky that I've got special permission for you to bring this camera into a very important and restricted area. You will, of course, be searched before you leave here. I see some of the silver is gone. Thank you.
So she has got her own homeland, which means that I can play with all the scandals which are associated with Homeland's policy. Her homeland is Babeti-Kosweti, of which there are 8 pieces, which is a reality, all these little pieces of homeland spread all over South Africa, not even joined together. She has the border of the homeland and South Africa that goes to her dining room table. So on the one side is South Africa, where you can't read Playboy magazine, and the other side is the homeland, where you can. So that immediately creates a very interesting farcical situation. Of course, also putting it in a supposedly non-existent homeland means that everybody who sees it in South Africa thinks, oh, well, it doesn't exist, it's fairyland. You know, Alice in Wonderland. But it does exist. But then Babeti-Kosweti is a state of mind, an independent state of mind. I keep saying anybody can live there.
Well, this is where it all started. I'm going up to the top of Table Mountain. Down below me is the whole of Cape Town, the mother city, encased by this extraordinary piece of nature, a womb with a view. I suppose it started here for South Africa, for white South Africa, and for me. I was born here in Cape Town, 1945. It's the most beautiful place in the world. It's been called the most beautiful things, the fairest cape in the whole circumference of the earth, and all sorts of other extraordinary adjectives. It also has this peculiar combination of tragedy in all this beauty. Down there is the wound that was District 6, where Cape Coloured people lived for all the centuries. They were moved out through the Group Areas Act. And District 6 is now a constant reminder of that horror. P.V. Botha was the Minister of Coloured Affairs who signed that decree as a matter of interest. The soul of a city and a people were wiped out when the Coloureds were kicked out of Cape Town. Nothing remains of the zest and vitality and joie de vivre of the days when District 6 was an integral part of this once so happy city.
Ironic, all this rioting in the coloured townships causing so much unhappiness in the government circles. But as they say, we Cape Coloureds fight the system from within, from our own little segregated parliament. Just a stone's throw away from the seat of white power. Come to Cape Town and get stoned. Yeah, man. We Cape Coloureds are the future of South Africa. Look at me, man. My ma was dark. My pa is light. I never knew my pa. No, we've always lived here in this coloured township. We even now call it a suburb. With those rough kids living in a house next to where we used to live with my old granny. Shame. My granny was already dead a year. The move killed her, they say. The move here from Cape Town. Yeah, my granny used to live in this beautiful house here in Cape Town where the white people now live. Actually, I'm married now, so it's not me. It's my mom, my sister, my wife. Yeah, I think when I finish this stint, I'll build a spare room for the baby. No, man, when I finish this stint in the army,
You look surprised, no? You didn't know there was coloureds and blacks fighting on the side of Botha's boys? Yes, man, there's no colour bar in desperation. It's ironic, eh? My little sister out there throwing stones at me. Can you blame her? Can you blame me? But I must say, every time we patrol past that house in Cape Town, with the high ceilings, the big windows, the wooden floors, and the stoopie that curls 3 parts around the house, I think of my old granny, sitting by candlelight and crying for her lost life. I can't help but hate. Each time a little more.
The view from the top of Table Mountain, like a great silent sentinel guarding the gateway to Africa, is breathtaking. It almost gives one a vision of the world and beyond. The pain and reality and misery of apartheid tend to disappear up here, but one is soon reminded of them. Out there, across the sparkling bay, lies Robben Island, the notorious penal colony for political prisoners, our own Alcatraz. Strange names for obscure, dusty townships have become household words all over the world. Langa, Guguletu, Sharpeville, Soweto. One of the things that South Africa would stubbornly and steadfastly not do for far too many years was repeal the hated influx control laws which prevented blacks from freely moving around the country. Under the law, a black person had to carry an identity document or passbook which strictly regulated where he could or could not live and work. If he did not have written permission to live in an urban residential area like Soweto, the vast black township alongside Johannesburg, he would have to return to his homeland or rural area allocated to his tribal group. Finally, however, in April 1986, the dreaded law, destroyer of families and ruiner of lives, was officially abolished. The government minister once responsible for implementing the influx control laws was Dr. Piet Koornhof, who also comes to the theatre to see me do him.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. 1985. 1985 was a very bad year because the communists were strong and the rand was weak. But the world outside only sees the dark side, the black side of our politics. And nobody realizes what nice things we whites do for the blacks in South Africa, i.e. and e.g. Last year we spent 200 million rand. 200 million rand, on subsidies for black bus passengers, mainly for commuters. Allow me to explain, i.e. and e.g. Your maid is in the kitchen, Now, her passbook is not in order. So now the police comes to take her, not to jail, Not to jail. Jails are full. We take her to the bus. Now, very gently, we put her on the bus, Now we give her a bus ticket. Now we send her back to the homeland. Now she gets to the homeland, Now she runs away from the homeland, man. Now she goes all the way back to Soweto. Now we've got to go into Soweto, but I've got the army there and the police there, and of course the world press is not there. So we go into Soweto and we find the maid. Now very gently we put her back on the bus, Now we give her another bus ticket. That's now the second bus ticket. Now we send her back to the homeland. Now she gets to the homeland, man. Now she runs away from the bloody homeland again. No, wait a minute. She doesn't go back to Soweto. Oh no. Traveling has now made this lady wise. Now she becomes a tourist. Now she comes to Cape Town, Now she becomes a squatter. Now she squats. They're on the Cape Flats. Now we've got to send the bulldozers into Crossroads and break down a little tin shack and take her back to the bus. Now, not so gently, we put her back on the bus, Now we give her a third bus ticket. That's now the third bus ticket for one person. And believe me, ladies and gentlemen, there are still 21 million other black people in South Africa still waiting for their bus tickets. Oh, man.
Racism isn't funny. Nazism isn't funny. Cancer isn't funny. Death isn't funny. I think I learned from two people very strongly. One lady was a friend of my mother's, a German Jewess who was in Auschwitz. And I met her a few years ago, very old lady, with you know, the thing here. And she saw one of my shows. And she said to me, she said, I can never explain this to you, but she said, I recognized a feeling that we had in that camp. We made terrible jokes to stay alive. Another friend of mine who had cancer made these appalling, not jokes, not funny jokes, but she was completely open about what was wrong with her and what was going to happen to her. And we couldn't take it. We just kept on saying, don't say it. But they taught me the lesson. You know, that I'm not saying that one must make jokes about terrible things, but one must actually talk about them and present them. And of course, I've got a very tricky situation being in the theatre. If I was in a church, it would be a different matter. If I was a politician, it'd be a different matter. But I have to balance things very carefully. And yes, racism is not funny. Comedy's in the eye of the beholder. I don't put a banana peel down. And if people think it's funny, they must decide. They must laugh. If they don't want to laugh, that's also fine. So there are no signals saying, please laugh, please applaud. I know of people who said to me, your show's a requiem. It's a requiem to a dying society. It's a nightmare. It's a horror story. Yes, it is. It's all that. It's all that. Then some people have said, it is the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I say, why do you think it's funny? They said, well, just because I've never heard such things and you say these terrible things, and it's so funny to hear you say these terrible things about the government. And also, very interesting, the right wing laugh because I make fun of the left wing at times. I also make fun of the right wing. But then the left wing laugh because I make fun of the nationalist government. And everybody has a chance to be angry. I mean, I know that at one moment, everybody will be terribly cross. And maybe that same person will also have a moment of release because suddenly the target moves to an area that he can just sit and take a deep breath. It's an ongoing battle to keep the trump card of surprise. That is my only trump card as a performer. I can't do the same old story, except all my material never changes. What can I do? Nothing changes in this country. People have said, we're sick of PV Botha. I said, you're right. Get a new government, for goodness sake, you know.
No, 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 we're going too far. Well, I don't know, this chappie both wants to give up apartheid. It's bloody silly. I mean, that's what we all came here for in the first place, isn't it? Oh, by the way, I just hope you chaps have a better year. We've had so much awful news about poor old Maggie getting her knickers in a twist about all sorts of things and those bloody fools throwing eggs at the Queen and what would happen next. Oh, well. But I'll be honest with you, chaps. You know, when you watch SATV here in South Africa, you realize how bad things really are in England. And all those race riots, racial tension, police brutality. We left just in time, what? Oh, well, there you are. Don't believe all the rubbish you read about us over there, will you? Oh, and say hello to poor old England for me. Oh, well, I suppose when the shit really hits the fan here, we'll just pack up and come home.
Of course, I don't only put the people in the political spotlight under my own spotlight. I suppose I try to reflect everyone in this mad, sad, sometimes ridiculous country of ours, including the average Mr. and Mrs. South Africa. One has to, I suppose, keep two definitions in mind. One was something Lenny Bruce said. He said, tragedy plus time equals satire. In South Africa, we have tremendous tragedy and no time. Therefore, I wonder where the satire is. Joan Rivers, of all people, said that 49% of anger and 51% of comedy was okay. But 51% of anger meant that you had nothing at all.
I'm a white South African and I'm proud of it. And my ma's a white South African. And my pa's a white South African. And my grandparents is white South Africans. And we've all been here in South Africa since 1800 and even before, so fuck you all. I'm a white South African and I'm proud of my culture. And the beer, and the rugby, and the police. And we all love our country and he's proud of it, so fuck you all. I'm a white South African and I live in a white area. because that's what I voted for and why I voted. And anyway, who wants to live next to Kafirs who are stupid like baboons? Can't even behave like human beings. And anyway, apartheid is decent and protects us against communists and queers and Kafirs and anyway, it's in the Bible, so fuck you all. So fuck you all. I'm a white South African and I'm proud of apartheid, so...
Because I'm an Afrikaner, because I'm responsible for this situation, because I can't point a finger and say the government is responsible for apartheid. We, whites, are responsible because we've sat here for too long. Even though we moan about it, I mean, the mere fact that one is in South Africa makes one part of the system. Because I've always said, if people don't like it, they must go somewhere else. And if they stay here, they must change it.
Kids ready for supper? Kids, are you ready for supper? Okay, kids, get in the car. Dora, take the dogs, get them some Kentucky Fried Chicken. They love it. Those dogs really freak me out. But I suppose that's what you get when you cross a Rottweiler with an Alsatian. At least you get a white neighborhood. Dora, don't take the master's Mercedes or my BMW, hey? Take your own Golf. Oh, and Dora, don't give the kids Irish coffee. I don't want my kids spoilt. Oh, my God, I am exhausted. Let me tell you, since Dora's got her driver's license, she's taken such a weight off my shoulders, I can't start to tell you. She now drives the kids to dinner every night. Aren't I lucky, Mother? All I have to make for supper are 4 reservations. Anyway, most of the steakhouses here around Joburg are multiracial, or just don't care, which means Dora can also eat something. Except suddenly she's gone vegetarian. Just eat salads and vegetables and things like that. So much for cannibals in Africa. Reminds me of a joke my husband Herbert told me the other day. He said they've got a local South African version of Russian roulette that you can play at the Sun City Casino in Botswana. It seems you go to bed with 4 black girls and one of them turns out to be a cannibal. I don't understand it either, I swear to God. There are 2 things I just can't stand about South Africa. Apartheid and the blacks. Anyway, I don't want to talk about politics. I just want to say, if it wasn't for Dora, I would have a nervous breakdown on the spot, I swear to God. Do you know that girl is so outstanding, I would do anything for her. Except every now and then we have these problems with her permit and her passbook and her kids getting arrested and all those men in her room at the back. But shame, what can a person do? Hey, she's only human. Anyway, things being what they are, I said to my husband the other day, I said, listen, doll, maybe it's about time we just put our money where her mouth is. So my dolls, let me tell you something outstanding. Herbert and me have decided to build Dora her own little house in Soweto. Now listen, it's a bargain. They've thrown around so many stones you don't have to buy bricks. Now it's a nice kosher little pad, you know, with a little patio where she can entertain. Of course, there's place for a pool, but Herbert said, for God's sake, wait with the pool. Rome was not built in one day. Of course, Herbert would know. Anyway, she's got a nice little jacuzzi in her bedroom, just in case she must, you know. Oh, and those Keelam carpets we got at a closing down sale at Katz's. Oh, and of course, a sunken lounge like Alexis Carrington's got in Dynasty. And a spare room for her family. Can't say I'm mad about the idea of that family trampling mud and muck all over the house. But they seem to have this very close family thing going among blacks, hey? God, it's revolting.
Anyway, we've had the whole place burglar barred and burglar proofed, you know, so if a Kaffir touches anything, he'll be in jail before you can whisper Amandla. Well, no, Dodge, you know, they don't really have any electricity, really, and facilities in Soweto. I mean, whatever you've seen on TV is just basically for show, you know. Wires hanging from the ceiling, holes in the street. With all those burnt-out cars, it looks like a scene from Beirut. Anyway, Herbert's put in a nice little generator for Dora that she can have the nice things, you know. Hairdryer, microwave, deep freeze, home computer. Do you know, the usual. And of course, a video machine and a TV set. And there's the whole point. If we have to hand over South Africa to a black majority government, my husband and me will just move into our own little house in Soweto. Let me tell you, we've even got a nice spare room for our maid, Dora.
I use terrible words in my shows, words like Kaffir. Kaffir is the word that nobody wants to use anymore. They say, we don't use that word anymore. We don't call blacks Kaffirs, we call them blacks. But blacks here, Kaffir here, you know, like apartheid here, separate development there. I mean, what the mouth says, the brain thinks, the old thing. Black people think it terribly funny to hear that word. A friend of mine said to me, a black friend of mine, oh, she said, you know, this word Kaffir is so funny, especially when you whites say it and get such a shock, because the white audiences get into a terrible tiz when they hear that word. Also, for example, TUTU, the TUTU character I do. When I was in England, anti-apartheid people came to me and they said, you can't do TUTU, you're a racist. I said, I'm not a racist, I'm a South African. They said, same thing. They said, he's black, you're an Afrikaner. I said, no, TUTU is a South African. I'm a South African. And one of the reasons I do TUTU is because my black friends said to me, why don't you do us? I said, well, they said, no, don't segregate us. We're also South Africans. So I've been doing more and more black characters.
My dears, thank you very much, my friends. When President P.W. Botha crossed the Rubicon in search of change and reform in South Africa, he took me along to row the boat. And halfway across the Rubicon, the hurricane winds of change blew off P.V. Botha's hat. And as we all know, P.V. Botha cannot think without his hat. So I got out of the boat and I walked across the water to where the hat was drifting. I picked up the hat. I walked back to the boat across the water. I handed P.V. Botha back his hat. And the next day, the South African Broadcasting Corporation objectively reported that Bishop Desmond Tutu cannot swim.
I like doing a tango in front of a firing squad. I think that's part of the whole the taste of it for me is to fight it, but fight it there, fight it in the lounge, fight it on the polished table in Parliament, not out on a limb. I don't want to be a voice in the wilderness. I mean, the wilderness is full of voices. Nobody can hear anymore. Everybody's shouting. I want to use the system to actually rub the system's nose in its own little puddle. And it's working. I mean, it's working. And if they don't like it, they must come and stop me. I've said this time and time again. The government... Look at me, finger. Say the word government, my finger goes up. You know, the government writes my material. The South African government, I edit the government gazette, I take what they say, and I put it into my context. Context, well, I load it onto a character, but it's not my own words. Now, that helps me tremendously, because if the censors want to ban my show, they've got to ban the government. But I'm not doing anything. Big deal. Look, there are hundreds of people in this country who take chances every day, eh? Hundreds of people, black and white, who take their lives into their hands, who take risks for the future, for decency, and which is far beyond anything that I do on stage. I mean, I perform, but I think it's because I'm very much in the public eye through what I do that people think it's actually a battle against the government. It's a battle against myself. I'm an Afrikaner. I'm also Jew. My mother was a Jew, Jewess, came from Berlin. So I'm a Jewish Afrikaner. I belong to both chosen people. My grandmother, my Afrikaans grandmother, sold her family farm to start the National Party. So, I mean, it's mine. I can do with it what I like. And my father's cousin was the first nationalist prime minister. You know, so I've got to speak from very deep into the heart of Afrikanerdom. And that is maybe the one reason that I've got so far, on the one hand, and maybe also the other reason that it's been such a success is because I personally wouldn't take this type of material from somebody who wasn't South African.
And therefore, allow me to state here my mandate for change and reform in this country. But I don't say it just here in a presidential capacity. I say it here on behalf of the hundreds of those in South Africa who want to say it. I say it here on behalf of the tens of thousands of those in South Africa who try to say it. I say it here on behalf of the millions of those in South Africa who aren't allowed to say it. But I'm in charge here.
But who is in charge here? We have a nation of over 27 million people, and the vast majority would die to rid themselves of apartheid. Very few would die to protect it. And yet we are constantly living in a national state of emergency under which the facts become fiction. The press and media are censored. The state controls the television and radio. The segregated revolution becomes more of a reality as blacks and whites move away from one another.
South Africans' problems will be solved by South Africans and not by foreigners. We are not going to be deterred from doing what we think best, nor will we be forced into doing what we don't want to do. All South Africans must be placed in a position where they can participate in government through their elected representatives. We have outgrown the outdated colonial system of paternalism, as well as the outdated concept of apartheid.
To the members of the media, be careful. My mind is made up, eh? Don't confuse me with facts.
So, what are the facts? The real facts. Today, 85% of South Africa is still zoned for whites only. 4 million whites, 25 million blacks. Also, separate swimming pools, separate schools, separate residential areas. Apartheid is alive and well. The real facts. The work for blacks is in the cities. And in spite of the fact that the past laws don't exist any longer, under other laws, wives and children must remain in the tribal homelands, waiting. The rural areas where blacks must live and survive is crippled by drought and erosion and lack of the education needed to till the land. Education in South Africa is another fact. The great gulf between white and black education was the basis to the Soweto riots in 1976 and has grown since. Oh yes, we export food, but malnutrition is rife, especially among the children. Electricity hums throughout the land, and yet most of the black townships have no lights, no fridges, no stoves, no toilets, no hot water. South Africa also has to cope with an all-too-high population growth rate, aggravated and promoted by apartheid, because in many areas family planning and birth control are frowned upon and wrongfully regarded as a form of mass genocide being imposed on blacks by whites. You see, we are always bogged down in this country, bogged down at square one. The complexities of this land are enormous and the solutions aren't easy. But the overwhelming accusation against my country is its constitutional lack of basic respect for human dignity. That is its primary guilt. And so, in this society made to feel vulnerable and fearful by political change and uncertainty, it is not surprising to find examples of extreme extremes. Even in my audience, there will always be those extremes, from right-wing white to radical blacks, old and young, Afrikaans and English, and fears. I play on those fears. I have put Evita Bezuidenhout in the future, after that dreaded revolution. The question in the mind of all whites, one day, will they do unto us as we did unto them?
Black people are now in charge. Black people make the laws. Black people hire and fire. Black people can come into homes any time of the day and night, usually at 2 o'clock in the morning. In their police uniforms without a warrant, they can search, they can hit us, they can shoot us, They can arrest us, they can take away our children and keep them for 6 months and not tell us where they are. Yes, my friends, they learnt it all very well. And that's why we must remember and go forward into the future with our eyes open. When a black man talks to you, which doesn't happen very often, you must now say, in his own language, ewe, or if you can't remember that ethnic word, say da, comrade. Or I remember in 1986, we taught you Zulu on the television, sayabona and kunjane. Of course, I remember those words because we had a cat called sayabona and a little dog called kunjane. My dear friends, one thing I want to remind you again and again, learn from what we did in the 80s in our politics. You can say one thing and mean another, because that is the one cornerstone of survival. Hypocrisy is the Vaseline of political intercourse. Comrade, may I say something personal? Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank President Mandela for lifting my banning order so that I could leave Babeti and come to speak to you here today. Also, thank you to our Minister of Law and Order, Mr. Oliver Tambo, for allowing me to speak to you out of the bottom of my heart. Baie dankie, Meneer Tambo. Thank you very much. Dear friends, I have good news. Thanks to the intervention of our few friends overseas, we don't have many, but thanks to Mrs. Margaret Thatcher, who is still the Prime Minister of England, in spite of everything she's gone through, and our other great friend, the President of the United States of America, Mrs. Nancy Reagan. Of course, you might not have heard, poor Ronald sleepwalked during a press conference and fell out of a window, and now he's up there with Marilyn Monroe. Ach, shame, he was always asleep anyway. Dear friends, our beloved leader, P.V. Botha, will soon be freed from Pollsmoor prison, although he still refuses to forswear violence. But they will let him out on humanitarian grounds because his wife, Tannie Elise, is eating them out of house and home.
Female impersonation in the theatre is quite acceptable, but to see it done in public is another matter. Here in South Africa, there are also laws against wearing drag, and yet, at the annual Evita Bezuidenhout lookalike competition, everyone has a good laugh at the system and themselves.
Dames and heren, I would like to say a special words here today on behalf of my government. And I say it here most categorically, that Mrs. Evita Bezuidenhout is a woman unlike any other woman. We thank her for single-handedly bringing the rand up to 50 cents in the dollar. Because if you depended on my cabinet, the rand would be 10 cents in the dollar.
And because holding up a cracked mirror to a cracked society, I never really know what they see from out there. Is it all in the eye of the beholder?
He always seems to go to the crux of whatever matter is relevant at that particular time. And of course, he's a wonderful mimic, so he gets all these political characters to a T. But I mean, his real role is that he reveals the absurdities of South African society, and in particular, of course, the political system of apartheid. He's always very good at that. And I think one of the great plus factors about Peter is that he manages to do this act so beautifully, but at the same time, he's never obscene and he's never insulting.
If he takes the mickey out of politicians in a manner which makes politicians look at themselves on the mirror, I think that has a role, really, because even some of the idiosyncrasies of politicians, if they are projected on the stage, I mean, that can have a role in showing how ridiculous some of the things that politicians stand for are.
The best way to get at someone is not to confront him with just serious debate. You make a mockery of a politician, and you really hit at the politician where he's most vulnerable, and where he can't answer back because people are laughing at him. And it worries the politician. And the guy then thinks about it at night, and it certainly has its effect. It's a catalytic way that Pieter-Dirk Uys has.
It is when people take themselves too seriously that disaster looms. If we are able to say, but actually we are rather ridiculous, we may find that because we have funny bones that are tickled, and that we may actually be able to laugh at the same jokes, that we can discover our common humanity. He is actually making some wonderful commentaries on our South African way of life, and perhaps because people are not feeling too threatened, they think it is theater and it is that you are going to be laughing. They've let down their defenses somewhat, and some truths which would otherwise have found it difficult to find access actually penetrate, because he has conveyed them in a way that didn't make people bristle. And I think we've got to thank God for him. No, I don't think. We do thank God for him.
Now this is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me, P.V. Botha. As long as this thing exists in South Africa, I'll be in business. Nearly 800 South Africans became officially members of a different race group last year, according to figures quoted in Parliament and based on the Population Registration Acts. They included 518 coloreds who were officially reclassified as white, 14 whites who became colored, 7 Chinese who became white, 2 whites who became Chinese, 3 Malays who became white, 1 white who became an Indian, 50 Indians who became colored, 54 coloreds who became Indians, 17 Indians who became Malay, 4 coloreds who became Chinese, 1 Malay who became Chinese, 89 blacks who became colored, 5 coloreds who became black. I couldn't make it up if I tried.